Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown. Today, my guests are teacher, mediumistic, and Bible researcher, Sydney Schwartz, and Reverend Hewitt, pastor and founder of Gifts of the Spirit Church. And both of these gentlemen are co-authors of the book, My First Encounter with an Angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom. And in this episode today, we will be discussing something that I found quite intriguing as a result of a seminar that I attended at Reverend Hewitt's church, Gifts of the Spirit Church, and the topic of that seminar that day was the soul. And when I myself tried to come up with a reasonable answer as to exactly what the soul is, where it is, and its function, I found that the most that I could verify was the definition in the Webster's New World Dictionary. That definition being an entity without material reality, regarded as a spiritual part of a person. Well, needless to say, that didn't really tell me much, and I was quite curious because I had never heard some of the things that I had heard that day in that seminar. So now I will direct the questioning to you, Reverend Hewitt, and ask you, what exactly is the soul?
Well, before I explain that, I really would like to give a message to the viewers of this program to pay close attention, because what they're going to learn is you cannot find it in a book, and it certainly isn't taught in any churches, because as a medium myself, as a young boy in my teens, I had more questions than anyone could find answers to. So I wanted to know, where is the soul? What is it? What does it do? And if it exists, why can't you see it? So I had a lot of questions. And then I found the part in the Bible where Jesus himself said, "Knock and the door shall open. Ask and you shall receive." Well, I used to knock and I used to ask questions and I got my answer. So I'm going to share this to the viewers. First of all, we have to go back into the book of Corinthians, where it says you're born with two bodies. You're born with a physical body and you're born with a spirit body. The spirit body is just as invisible as the oxygen in this room, which we really need to keep us alive. It is just as real as the wind outside, of which you cannot take a picture of. It's invisible. So the soul is an energy field that we know very little about, and yet the soul is in a body that is a duplicate of our body. So when death comes to the physical body, it gives birth to the spirit body, see? So the spirit body leaves the physical body at death, and it continues to live. There's no place that you would call a halfway house or purgatory or anything like that. That was all created because they had to come up with some kind of answer to the people who were asking the questions. And so, yes, there is such a thing as the soul. It's located right behind the breastbone. There's a cavity in the chest there. And a lot of people, when they pick up impressions or emotion, they feel they think they feel it in their heart. They don't. It's not the heart. The heart is nothing in the world but a pump. But the heart is on a little bit to the left of where the soul is. The soul is right in the center behind the breastbone, out of harm's way. And yet the soul, what we look like, our personality, everything about us, even to the amount of hair we have on our head, is recorded in the soul. So when we leave this body at death, we're in a body of energy, but yet it's invisible to our physical eyes. But to those that have already gone over into the other dimensions, it's as visible as we are to each other at this table. And this only proves that we live on. But there are certain people on the planet that have been born with the gift of the Spirit, of which is also mentioned in Corinthians, because you see, I use the Bible as a history book. I use it as a diary of another time. And God is not just one entity out in another piece of real estate in the sky, but God is within us, all of us. For Jesus himself said to find the kingdom of God, look within yourself. But recently it's been told to me that he didn't say that. He said to find the kingdom of God, go within yourself. Well, to me, there's a big difference in going within and looking within. You understand? So, as a medium, I realize that these people that have passed on, they've gone to another dimension. And that dimension is not up in the sky, but it's another frequency, another vibration, which is right here, intermeshed in the physical world, exactly where we are now. My father, I had a business over in Gales Ferry, Connecticut, back in '64, and I had gone down to see my father a week or so before that, and that morning I knew that he was going to leave this plane and go to the other, and I heard his voice as clear as you're hearing my voice right now. But this is the gift called clairaudient, meaning clear hearing. And so he said, son, I have just come over. And I told the lady I was working with, because at that time I was in a barbershop beauty salon, and I was working on a lady's hair, and I said, I'm not going to be able to finish your permanent this morning because I have to, my father just died. Well, she looked very bewildered because she knew darn well I hadn't taken the time off from her to answer the phone and everything else, because it was hard for me to explain how I knew that he had died. And it was like 2 seconds later, my receptionist came to me and she says, Carl, I think you better take this in your inner office. And I went in there and I heard my brother's voice, and I said, Daddy just died, didn't he? And there was a hesitation, and then he said, oh, that's right, you have whatever that is you have. He didn't even know how to describe it. And so life goes on, but there are certain people on the planet that have the gifts of the Spirit, just as you, in Corinthians, it says, thou shalt not have you ignorant of the gifts of the Spirit. However, this does open the door to a lot of unscrupulous people that do not have the gifts of the Spirit. So the soul is everything the body is, but it doesn't have all the organs. It's a body of energy. It's very hard to explain. So everyone from the other dimension has given me the same kind of answer. It's as if every one of them had been to the same school, see?
So we all possess a soul.
Absolutely.
This part of us that's, let me understand this, that's an energy source.
It's the other body.
Okay.
When they talk about we got born with two bodies, it's the other body.
Well, that, of course, opens up a whole bunch of questions here. What happens to the soul once we die, once the body dies?
Okay, let me give you an idea. Let's say that John Smith is he's in very bad condition here, and he's on the verge of passing. Okay, now let's say he's in the hospital, and he's in his last 30 breaths, counting down from 30 down to 1, and when he gets down to about 9, 8, 7, counting down, it's then that the soul dislodges itself from the cavity in the chest. It dislodges itself, and it goes up through the top, and it comes out the top of the head, that soft spot on a baby's skull. It comes out there, and as it moves up about 15 inches above the body, the cord, in the Bible I believe it's called the silver cord.
Silver cord, yes.
That is a cord of energy. It's been connected to the physical body through that cord of energy. That cord of energy snaps just like a rubber band would snap. And when it does, then the spirit body is free of the physical body, and it is in such ecstasy because it's out of a body that was in pain, perhaps, a body that was not functioning, and it is in such ecstasy, there are no words to describe it except thousands of years ago, the only word that anyone could come up with was, it was heaven. And the person is seeing color around everything in the room. I don't care what's in the room, pictures, other people, drapes, whatever. There are lights, there's a different light that our physical eyes does not see. And this creates more of this ecstasy for the person. The person is very, very happy, but they think they're dreaming. But then at a distance, let's say over there somewhat, a group of people would be watching this new entity. And when they see this person, it usually happens every time, when this person starts taking inventory of the room, and then they notice that there's a body laying there. They will look close at the body, and almost every one of them says, "My God, that looks like me." It's then that that group of people is standing in a distance, start moving in slowly to allow this person's spirit eyes to adjust, and he or she that's just passed recognize those are their relatives, friends, loved ones that have passed on before they did. They've come to greet them.
In the Bible, if you read in the 25th chapter of Genesis, it talks about Abraham dying, and it says when he gave up the spirit, and some say when he gave up the ghost, he was gathered to his people. And that's what that phrase meant, gathered to his people, that in the spirit world, his family came along and met him. And so that's recorded in the Bible. See, the biblical people understood all the psychic knowledge, and they were very well aware of it because it was part of their lives. And that's why that's written it that way in the Bible.
Now let's go back to something that Jesus said. He said, "In my Father's house there are many dimensions." They changed that word from dimensions to mansions in the month of June in the year 325 at the Council of Nicaea. But let's talk a little bit about the dimensions. The dimensions would be like frequencies that we are familiar with today. And for instance, if you're a teacher, you would go to a frequency, a level where other teachers go. If this man here was a musician, he would go to where musicians go. If someone like the man behind the camera is in photography, he would go where other photographers go. And if a person is bad, real bad, that person would go where the bad people go. If a person is loving, they would all go where the loving people go. You see? This is what is meant by you make your own heaven or hell as you live here. See? That's what that means. What I'm teaching you did not come from a book. It did not come from anybody else's lips. It came to me because I asked questions. And a person who is clairaudient, meaning clear hearing, can hear the voices of spirit as clear as you're hearing my voice right now. But this is difficult for people to understand because unless you understand the two bodies, it would be very difficult for a person to understand any of this. But right now, there are very gifted people coming forward. There's programs going to be on television this fall, some of these very, very good mediums. And I have met most of them. But they're coming forth at this time because right now the world is going through what has been prophesied as the end times. It doesn't mean the end of the world. It means that we're going from the age of ignorance into the age of knowledge. But if we had a way of going backwards, go back before the pyramids were built, the people at that time, they did not have religions like we have today all over the world. They knew where they would go when they would die. And their brain was operating 100%. 100%. You ever have anybody question you as how much the brain is working today? Anybody ever ask you that question? No. It's only about 10% average. There are some people on the planet, they're called brilliant people. They would use about 1/3 of their brain. But look at most of the people only using just about 10%. Because if we were using 10% of, all of our brain, all of it, can you imagine how brilliant the people would be on the planet? And yet there are some babies, some children being born right now that are coming forth with all their brain operating. These are brilliant children. They're telling their parents a lot of things. The parents wonder where they're getting this from. It's simply because they've been sent back here to be the Illuminatis of the future. This is what this is all about.
Now, you mentioned a couple things here. The first is that the soul, if I understand this correctly, actually reflects our emotions, not really our heart, if we talk about having a heartache, it would really be our soul that
It's
we're
the soul that picks
referring
it up,
to.
yeah.
And then my other thought is, what's the connection with the soul and the brain? You talked about children coming to the planet with a greater percentage of their brain operating.
Good question. The soul is the modus operandi of our whole entire body. Let's say the soul is our computer, and it's the soul does not know right from wrong. It's an isness, and that took me a long time to ever accept that. They says it just is, and then others would say it's an isness. Well, he said that your soul can be programmed. For instance, if a person believes there is such a place as hell, and they record that in the soul. See, the soul records everything we do, every experience we've had. It doesn't know right from wrong, as I've said. And so when we die, we will go to wherever it's recorded in our soul that we're going. That's the way it is.
Now, where does the soul go? You mentioned that it's an energy form, and it appears that when you die, it's attracting to other people of the same interest as you, or likeness as you, or family as you are. But what happens to it after that? Does it just keep floating on forever and ever and ever?
It doesn't float. The soul, as I said, is the modus operandi of the physical body. And it is energy, and it goes into another dimension where their bodies are just as real as our bodies. But it's only the spirit eyes can see another spirit entity.
Certain authors talk about the soul as the etheric double, meaning that it looks just like the physical body, just as we do, but it's like invisible. It's like energy. So therefore, it doesn't have the solidness that this has, and you can almost see through it. But the face is the same and everything else. Now, when Reverend Hewitt does a reading, he's explained to me that let's say if my grandmother came to see me, and I was having a reading to give some information to him, and so he could repeat it to me, that she normally appears as if she were 30 years old, because that's what spirit people do. The soul keeps a picture of how you look until you're about 30 years old, and at that time it freezes. And that's how come, even though you could be 50 or 60 or 70 years old, you still feel much younger, because your soul is much younger. It stays in that. It stays there. So when it passes over into the spirit world, if my grandmother's coming to see me, she'll look as if she was 30 years old. So if Carl here would describe my grandmother when she was 30 years old, I wouldn't recognize her. So instantly, she changes her features to what she would look like when she was 80 or some odd years old. And that way, Reverend Hewitt can describe exactly what she looked like, and as soon as I recognize her, she goes back to being 30, because she doesn't want to look old anymore anyhow. So this is the way the soul works. And from what I've read about the spirit world is just like our world. They have their own houses, they have their own universities, there's places of learning. They have their own existence, and it's whatever they want, because they can create it with their mind, and they can pursue their interests just like they did here on Earth. For a number of years until it's time for them to come back to Earth.
Coming back to Earth. That's a good comment.
Reincarnation. Now that's a good one. Let's get into it. Okay, when a person has acquired everything that there is to learn in that dimension that they went to, then they have a choice. They can either come back, reincarnate, or they could stay at that level. Most of them reincarnate. Now, when a woman conceives, the auric field, I'm sure you've heard about that, the auric field, the aura around the body, that is the light that's coming from the soul. The soul produces the lowest frequency of light on the planet. Having second sight, I see the light around you. I see it around the cameraman over there. But when a woman conceives, that is the only thing that changes the color of her auric field. It's an off-white. Don't let anybody ever tell you it's red, green, blue, or yellow. It isn't. It's off-white. And when a woman conceives, it goes into a color that's very hard to describe, but it looks gold rose to me. And everyone in the other world sees that light around her, and they know that she has conceived. And if it's someone there that's watching that is connected with the family tree of this woman that is conceived, then that spirit will stay in the light field around the body, but not in the body. Around the body until she's gone 96 days into the pregnancy. And then there's a window of time there. Isn't it a 96 days?
To 111.
About 96 to 111 days. There's a window of time. And what it does, it lowers its vibration 7 levels down, and then it enters through her solar plexus, and it seats itself into the womb, into that little baby she's carrying, right in its chest. That's where the soul seats itself, the proper place. It knows where it's supposed to be. And the moment it does that, the baby starts kicking in the mother's womb, because before that, it was just another organ of the mother's body. You see? So now it kicks, and it will be kicking off and on for maybe several days or even a few weeks until it adjusts to that energy field, the soul. When it adjusts to that. And from that period of time on till the baby comes into the world, it takes on the genetics of its parents. It also takes on the imprint of the life it had before.
The way Awan explained it to me is that when the soul first comes into the mother's aura, it just doesn't sit there. It orchestrates things. It is helping the formation of the fetus inside.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from a scientific point of view, when people studied genetics, there was a grid of a quadrant of four spots where there was 4 possibilities of where certain genes could work out. Well, it's that spirit that's in the mother's body that's picking which one of those sets that it wants, and it's the energy of that soul that's engineering and making it happen the way that soul wants it. So the soul is pretty much picking out the body and forming it the way it wants it. Once it enters into the fetus, it's not as strong as it is outside in the mother's aura. That's why it stays out there 96 days to help form the fetus the way it wants it.
So what you mean to tell me is this soul of this entity literally does some shopping and picks out the mother that it
Yes.
wants?
Good way
Yes.
to put it.
And a family situation it wants to live in, yes.
But there are times that a soul gets, as they explained to me, sucked into a body, sometimes in a third world country, and the child comes into like that, because the soul, I mean, the soul or the body the soul was in before, other lifetimes, have never been taught any of this knowledge. So therefore the soul records everything that we learn. All knowledge is recorded in the soul, not recorded here. This is the receiver. And when the body is dead, this is dead. So it goes to show, using common sense, that when the body is dead, the brain is dead, so therefore if it's stored here, then there would be no knowledge, right? It's stored in the soul. So this is why you might hear of a person, say for instance, what's his name on TV now, John?
John Edwards?
John Edwards. John Edwards is a genuine medium, and the people in the world of spirit is communicating through to him, because he is the medium, meaning in the middle between the two worlds, the world of physical, the world of spirit. Simple as that. And this is what Jesus taught when he came to the world. He taught the gifts of the Spirit, and they silenced him. The priests silenced him because they couldn't compete with him. And so they got rid of him. And then after he died, he communicated and chose a man by the name of Saul, and his name was changed to Paul, and then they canonized him as a saint, used him as the medium from there on. This is why you have the books of Corinthians. All of that is coming from Jesus, but now using the medium to record it. Just like I have been used as the medium between the other dimension to this man, because this man here wrote these books. He wrote this book, and he's writing another book now, which is going to be a blockbuster as far as I'm concerned, because when I listen to the tapes, because I'm in a trance state, I do not know what is said until I listen to the tapes or I read the book. So I'm the medium, just as Saul was the medium at that time. It's all in that book, the Bible.
So now the soul finds its parent to bear it or give it a body, but there are, I'm sure, for every person who dies, there could be millions of souls floating around there. You said not floating, but at different dimensions. How does a soul know when to come back, or who to come back to.
When it's gained all the knowledge in that frequency it can gain, then there is a longing, there is a knowingness within itself that it has to come back in a physical body.
Okay.
And there's sometimes the soul, once it arrives and is born into the physical world, it's decided that it's made a mistake. And at that time, it'll withdraw, and the spirit will go back to the spirit world. The child dies, and that's what's known as SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome.
Crib death.
Crib death. That's what happens. Is the soul has decided it's made a mistake.
I told them one time, they were telling me that years ago. I said, I think that's very cruel to the parents, because I happen to know a couple at the time. It was their only child. That little child died. And I thought that was very cruel. And they said, their answer was, that's the way it is.
Really?
Yes.
That's the way nature is, they said. So there's so much to this that's very difficult for a lot of people to accept. And,
So you're really saying some of these things that happen really aren't accidents.
that's what they say, they're
That's
not
right.
accidents.
Isn't that interesting? If the soul comes back and finds a body, then for whatever reason the body dies suddenly, does the soul immediately seek another body?
Mm-mm.
Does that change the circumstances with how the soul or the person or the entity
What
died?
probably happened is that the soul probably chose that person because they knew it was going to die at a young age.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson that soul needed to learn in that particular lifetime.
Don't forget, the soul lives in a timeless dimension. We live in a time flow. And so therefore, they know when we're going to pass. This is why there was a very close friend of mine that happened to be up here, Uncles on the Themes, and Spirit told me many months before he passed, told me to tell the wife, and I did, and that he should go to a doctor for physical, and she says he hates doctors. And I said, well, if he doesn't go and do something now, he's not going to be here too long, possibly 11 or 12 months. Well, she found that hard to believe herself. And sure enough, within 6 months' time, it came to the surface. And while he was there, in his last 3 days, his mother and father visited him, and told him a lot of things that he would be joining them very shortly. And when his wife walked into the room, she told, he scolded her. He says, don't come in here now. I'm talking to my mother and father. You see, and he died right after this. This is a real thing that happens. This is not a figment of someone's imagination.
I had one more question for this segment of our show on souls. All of us have talked about the notion of soulmates and finding a soulmate. From what you've explained to me, what is your understanding of a soulmate? Someone you're familiar with, or is it a soul that is meeting a soul that it knew before? I don't quite understand that. If you could
You'd have to go back
elaborate.
to the beginning of all beginnings, when there was only one gender of the soul, and then there was a split. There was a split to create the female and the male, the positive and the negative, you see. And the chances of a person coming here and finding their real soulmate is probably 1 in 6 trillion.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Very, very, and a lot of people watching this program say, oh, no, I found my soulmate. No, you didn't. You just think you did. And I'm glad for them if they think that way, because it means that they've got a good marriage, but chances are not there.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps up our show today on part 1 of the soul. I think what we will do is continue next time with the knowledge of the soul originally being one and splitting into genders. And we will take it from there on part 2 of the soul. Thank you for joining me today,
Thank you.
and thank you for joining us.